Hey, Adam, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian, for having me here. So a little bit about me. So I'm a firm believer that who you are is not what you do. So who I am, I'm the kind of guy that is an endless pursuit of physical, mental, and emotional health and physical wealth. But what I do, I spent a little bit, almost a decade in software sales. Most recently at a little known company called Salesforce, and now I'm on my own business called Tech Stack Advising, where I help organizations source and select the right software for their business across sales, customer service, and IT.
And given that intro was very unusual, why sales? Because sales typically isn't fitting into that description.
That's right. Well, as a kid, I didn't want to be a professional athlete, like or a firefighter or a policeman. I wanted to be a businessman,
Did you
and I knew I wanted
get a little
to. Yeah,
suitcase in first grade?
yeah. I must have seen a couple movies where the rich businessman was glorified with a cool corner office and golf clubs. But I also I wanted to make a lot of money. So that's what I did as a kid. I worked in my family business, and I was selling high end luggage and travel accessories to business travelers at age 13.
Retail or
Yep, retail.
okay.
So what's interesting about that is I was doing discovery and product demos before I even knew what discovery and demos were. So these business people would walk into the store and say, "Hey, how can I help you? I'm looking for luggage." Cool. Well, how often do you travel? What kind of travel do you do? And then I would make product recommendations and show each piece of luggage to the customer. And then when the customer would say, "Oh, I want to go with the cheap one," I said, "Well, Mr. Customer, didn't you say you travel every week? Don't you want something to last?" So I've been training for this moment my whole life.
Wow, that's good because I think luggage, unlike a lot of things, there is a very specific use case. And like everyone wants to start with the cheap, right?
Mhm.
Until
Yep.
6 months later, the handle falls off or the zipper falls off or breaks. But, and what excited you other than the money in sales?
I was good at it. I was good at it from day one. I mean, being a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, all through high school, I was having an immense amount of success selling, $1,000 pieces of luggage to these business people. And I was like, yeah, when you're good at something, you tend to like it.
But how did you take that approach versus the show and tell approach, talking about how great the leather is and it's fine Corinthian and the stitching was, talking about the product instead of the problem and what the
Yeah.
client wanted. Did your
Well,
dad
it's all
teach you
trial
that
and
or?
error. Yeah, my dad, to me is the best salesperson I know to this day. He taught me that, and then I think what's really important as a seller, no matter what you're selling and what environment, you want to see the people that are good at it and learn from them. But just as important, you see who's bad at it and learn what not to do. And the sellers in the store that were bad at it, I just did the opposite of what they did,
Yeah.
and they talked about features.
That worked for me as well. I called them anti-mentors
That's right. Yep.
because
Yeah,
everybody's
not
like,
role
I
models.
need a mentor. And it's like, well, just look around. The
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
who are doing it bad don't do that.
There's no shortage of people not succeeding, but hey, it's never their fault that they're not succeeding.
And when you got into B2B, clearly that's different than retail, single transaction. Once they leave the store, forget it, right?
Mhm.
And B2B, it's much more about keeping the momentum going.
That's
Keeping,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think it depends on which segment of B2B it is. So you can do transactional B2B, and then when you grow your career, I think there's an opportunity to be talk about momentum and talk about a process and talking about keeping it going and keeping a relationship. And there's things to learn in each segment, I think.
Yeah. And how did long did it take to learn those skills in B2B?
Well, it depends how much of a thirst I think you have for
How long
learning.
did it take you? It's not a third person question.
Yeah, that's right. So I think I learned it very quickly because, even though I was the top rep at every company I've ever been at, I never thought I was the best. I always thought I had something to learn, and I consistently read books and asked other people for advice. So I think I learned it pretty quickly, and I got my first enterprise sales role at age 25, and ended up being the number one rep. One of those years I was there. So pretty quickly, because the money, I wanted to make the money, and I wanted to be the best. So you better learn.
So the competition, did that drive you more than the finance?
I was competing with myself. I always wanted to be a better version of myself than I was before. So, when I would close deals, I would audit my own deals. Okay, how did the process go? Where did I feel like the deal was kind of slipping? How did I save it? And then how did we get it closed? And then I would really drill into, okay, where did the deal start to get a little suspect? And I would drill in and think about, how can I prevent that from the next time? So it's just a consistent competition with myself, and always wanting to get better.
And what did you typically find? Or what were some of those epiphanies? Because I love the word prevent, because, everyone comes to you once it's wrong or the deal's dead. And they say, well, how do I fix this? As opposed
That's
to
right.
how do I prevent it next time? Fixing
Yeah.
is, you feel like an ER surgeon, right? You're like, someone comes in after a motorcycle accident, fix me, and good luck, right? But preventing it, wear a helmet, don't go out in the rain, keep it under the speed limit or at the speed limit. In deals, we tend to just go until it breaks. And then we run to our manager. It's like, what do I do? What were
Yeah.
some of those epiphanies that you had?
I learned, well, I didn't perfect this until later in my career, but I learned early in my career that discovery wins deals. If you can do an effective and strategic discovery, what that does for you and the customer is it builds a level of trust between you and the customer. And when you can establish a level of trust between you and your customer, the deals will rarely break in the process. But doing a great discovery is way easier said than done. So that actually took me quite a while to really learn how to build genuine curiosity. I think if we could bottle it and productize genuine curiosity and sell it to salespeople, we'd be billionaires.
Because so many things tip off of curiosity, right? You can't be interested unless you're curious. You're not going to ask questions unless you're curious. You're going to make assumptions if you're not curious. You're not going to go 1, 2, 3 levels deep unless you're really curious. Because what our customers are telling us is typically not the deep, honest truth. It's some smokescreen gaslighting of what they want us to think, or what they think. What was some of the things in the discovery that really got you to the next level?
Yeah, I think there's a book out there that I'm sure many people have heard the title but have not read, and the book was "Start with Why." And I think that title is extremely misleading unless you read the book. So we have a lot of salespeople out there doing their discovery, and they're asking why over and over, kind of like your 3 or 4 year old asks you
Yeah.
why over and over, and it's annoying, and you get a little defensive. And by the fourth why, you're like, dude, you know, it's because I said so. And when I learned how to ask questions that start with the word how or what, that opened up the doors to much more strategic conversations, and it opened up my ability to reword questions that just inherently were more curious.
And can you give us an example of where that made a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in any kind of discovery or deal, the typical seller will want to ask, hey, what are you looking for? And, why do you do it this way? Or why are you looking at our product? Why did you agree to spend a time with a salesperson today? And, those are probably, relatively important questions, but those are level one questions. The next question is, how do you do it today? What is the use case? What's your current process for accomplishing XYZ? with your current solution? Who else is involved? How much time do you spend on this? And then you're starting to ask questions that lead to ROI before your customer even knows that you're getting to the ROI questions.
And then what do you take from that? You know, because they're good.
That, yeah, that should fuel a demo. So, I think I said earlier, deals are won in discovery, but I also firmly believe that deals are lost in demos. You could do the best discovery in the world and ask all these great questions and get all this information, and then just do the same demo that your sales engineer does a canned demo every single time. It's like, dude, that wasn't relevant. So a good discovery should inform a demo that's relevant for your customers based on their use cases. So instead of doing a feature demo, you take your discovery information and you do a use case and workflow demo based on personas. And that's telling a story, right? Doing a feature demo is like reading a dictionary. Here's all the words in the dictionary. But doing a use case and workflow based demo is like taking all those words in a dictionary, ordering them in a certain way that tells a story, and that's a novel. So as a customer, what would you rather do? Would you rather read the dictionary, or would you rather read an interesting novel?
Yeah. I think too many people look at the demo as just a step where the sales rep takes their phone and goes out in the hallway and checks email while the engineer shows them what the product does. That's not the
Yeah,
objective. It's really
no,
that
no, not at
transfer
all.
of ownership. That's, they call it a test drive, but a test drive, who's driving? It's the client that's driving the car. And, the best test drive I've ever had was somebody took me out and he did the trail the first time. And then he goes, "Here, you drive." And I was like, "Yeah." And we went through the same trail. And it was a lot of fun, because I was watching him do it and then he let me do it because I wanted to see it. And, granted, it was a great season to do it. It was a, topless car. You took the sunroof off and it was a sports car. It was windy road. It's like, what kind of music do you like? Turn the radio on. So that transfer of ownership took place. But how about like these bigger deals that you've done? What was the things that you learned along that? Because they were big, complex, and typically you were selling stuff that wasn't really the glamorous stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was recently at Salesforce, as you know, and that's
Yeah.
where I felt like I got my PhD in sales. And where I was, my previous role, I felt like I was a glorified BDR. I was a very highly paid BDR. And then when I got into the more strategic selling, I reframed and I said, okay, I'm actually now a consultant with a quota. And in strategic deals, what I learned that's really important is how to form a POV, or a point of view. And I learned that's how you get strategic and close the big transformational deals, is acting like a consultant with a quota and truly solving our customers' business problems and working as a team. And when you start getting internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, partners, you're not only a consultant, but you also become a project manager. And you're
Yeah.
not really selling anymore. You're actually managing 20, 30 different stakeholders with different roles and responsibilities in what I call the project. And that shift, I think is what, leads to a success in a big transformational deal.
And because a lot of people don't view that as selling, but that is the difference between kind of enterprise and small transactional deals. Because like, you know, the difference in those big deals wasn't discovery. It was aligning and setting a vision for where the company could go.
That's right. I 100% agree. And, when you develop these POVs, you kind of got to get buy-in, obviously, from the customer that,
Right.
hey, we're going to take a true look at at whatever solution it is you're selling. And that's where I frame this as a project. And that's, going back to your book that I've read multiple times. You teach your customer how to buy, because customers oftentimes don't know how to buy, even in the enterprise.
Ever.
So you lay out a project plan and you say, okay, these are all the stakeholders from your side. These are all the stakeholders from my side. And we gotta go through these different steps. And oh, by the way, who's your executive sponsor on your side as the customer? We're gonna introduce your executive sponsor to my executive sponsor, and we're gonna make sure that everyone's speaking and everyone's riding the same wave here. Because this is a project, you are going to have to dedicate time and resources to truly evaluate whether or not this is going to fit the needs of your business and your vision.
That's it, because too many reps take a reactive approach to it, that if there isn't that champion, they don't know what to do. They're kind of the champion's buddy. Champion says, do this. The problem with the champion approach is that eventually the champion hits resistance. Somebody says, why don't we put this off? Why don't we look at something else? How long can we get away with what we have already? The sales rep has to either take that over, or the champion has to have the strength to push through that. And they rarely do, unless there's something really compelling in it for them. But in the large enterprise, the sales rep can be that. And I think the analogy that you have about the project manager almost assumes the sale.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Because we're talking about how we're going to do this rather than if we should.
If we're going to, or when. It's how and when versus if. And all of a sudden,
yeah,
now
it's a powerful conversation.
It's a great conversation, because the customer is now assuming, oh, this is happening. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, if this is happening, I better get on board and cooperate and, make sure I get some credit for it.
That's right. That's right. And to your analogy earlier, you're basically putting your champion, or hopefully champions, plural, in the driver's seat to take turns and be the champion and take the credit for whatever part of the deal that they're most interested in. Because in these enterprise transformation deals, it's not just one single point product that you're putting in. This is, ideally, the transformational project is affecting multiple departments across IT, sales, customer service, marketing, finance, everything in between.
And it's not the cost of the product, it's the cost of change that's really the obstacle. And it's not so much your product versus someone else's product. It's, how are we going to get this done? And what was the value of learning this lesson?
Oh man, it made my deals much bigger. But it really took the stress level to a minimum. Because when you're running a project, you have a predefined timeline. You already have identified all the stakeholders. You've identified the fact that we need to do a business case. We're already scoping the implementation level of effort before the customer has even agreed to move forward. So you have this predefined process you're taking the customer through, and everyone knows the process, and we already have our meetings scheduled. We have our calendar all done. So it takes the stress out of the deal, but for the leaders love this because the deal becomes predictable.
The leaders on both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, was this something that someone taught you, a manager, a mentor, or was it out of necessity, or was it by accident, or?
Yeah, a little bit of all the above. And I don't mean to blow smoke, but your book really taught me this. The Maverick Selling Method taught me about the roadmap to money. So I learned that when I was in my first enterprise role. I read that book. But I think the huge benefit that I had the advantage of is that particular company, when you sold a deal, you'd get half of your commission up front, and you would get half of your commission when the customer was implemented in full and paid their first bill. So what does a sales rep do? he or she babysits the account during implementation. So you have the sales team going to implementation meetings, learn and being able to see project managers and platform engineers and all the stakeholders from inside and outside the business working to actually implement the software. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at these project managers running projects using whatever methodology, agile or waterfall or whatever it is. And I said, wait a second, I can do that too.
It's
I
not that
can,
hard. Yeah.
it's not that hard.
Yeah.
But most sellers don't ever get exposure to that kind of stuff.
Oh, nor do they want to take that responsibility on. That they think that they're there to talk about the product, the pricing, the options, the negotiation. But that's such a little piece of an enterprise sale. An enterprise sale is really about leadership. You're kind of leading that decision. And the assumptiveness of leading it, all of a sudden you become the champion of the initiative, not the
Mhm.
product. And certainly what you're selling, it's not just, they get a key or a login. They have to do professional services. They have to integrate with stuff. There's training. There's all kinds of things that have to go on. And the way to pull in all those people is they want to know about it. Oh, this is changing. And if you take that assumptive, this is happening, it's going to be implemented over this 16 months, whatever it is, then people are like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden you get a deal at the end of it.
Funny how that happens, right?
Well, give us a sense of the size of these deals.
The last deal I did at Salesforce was worth $25 million. It was to a hospitality company in the middle of a pandemic, which was quite a feat in of itself. And the theme of that entire project, as I call it, it's funny, I organically call it a project, is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. In this situation, we were actually allowing the consulting firm to put our product on their paper, which was something that had never been done before in the history of the company. So we were having to build a business case and even introduced more stakeholders within our internal company on how to get it done, which was quite the task, but
Yeah.
it ended up being worth it.
And I'm sure a lot of salespeople are hearing this going, well, I don't do deals that big. Well, you could do the same thing on smaller deals too. Because too many of
Absolutely.
us, we think one step ahead, right? It's in the CRM, right? What's the next step? So we have this next step mentality instead of looking at the whole game that we're playing. And usually the next step is let's check in and see what they think. Well, they're not thinking. They're typically reacting. Somebody has to know how to get this done. When you get your air conditioner replaced, the guy doesn't say, well, what's the next step? I don't know. I've never done this. I don't know how it works. It's like, change it. Right? That's why you're here. So there's a lot of that going back and forth. Now, what excited you about this? Clearly, it was an epiphany that you've kind of built up this skill. How did it feel once you had it?
Well, what's interesting, I think, about it, and you've alluded to this before, and I've always known this as well, is the best salespeople don't know why they're the best. And I didn't realize why I thought everyone was doing this. So to me, it wasn't necessarily too much of an epiphany. I just thought, oh, this is normal. This is what everybody does. And when I got exposed to other individual contributors or members of the extended team, as we call them, co-primes, they're like, Adam, no one else is doing this. You're the only one. And that's where I actually felt pretty good about myself and had my epiphany. I was like, oh, I, you're telling me I'm special? I thought I was just stubborn and just wouldn't take no for an answer.
Yeah, because, you know, I kind of got it out of need and desperation, but I also kind of took more of an engineering approach to it. right? Because in engineering, you start at the whiteboard, not at the keyboard. You draw out what you're trying to build before you start typing in the code to execute it. Because the coding's the hard part. The drawing's pretty easy. You're here, you want to go there. You know there's a bunch of stuff in the middle. What what do you wish you knew earlier that you knew now?
Oh, I wish, we talked a little bit about this earlier. I wish I knew the recipe to how to be more genuinely curious earlier. But
Yeah.
I don't, I'd known early on that, discovery wins deals, but again, like it took forever to learn how to be genuinely curious. So I wish I learned that more. And to this day, I don't know how I could have done it faster. I think maybe just experience. Also, just a sales hack that I wish I learned earlier that might have enabled me to become more curious is I learned about the concept of an investor deck. So you deal with these publicly traded companies, and most of them will put out investor decks to their investors for presentations or investor day or whatever it is. And previously, I was reading 10Ks, which you can go cross-eyed reading. But investor decks are like having the answers to the test. Everything that your customer wants to do is in that investor deck. And therein lies your answers. I wish I had learned that earlier. I was pretty successful without knowing that existed. That was a big nice to have is those investor decks.
And what did you see other reps not doing well? Were they just kind of setting up the meeting, giving the demo, sending a proposal over, hoping it closes? Or were they just the golfers taking the C-suite out for a golf outing and working off the relationship?
Yeah, I think unsuccessful reps, I think they have a few characteristics. One, they feel like they already are very good at what they do, but if they don't succeed, they blame it on the external environment, like their territory or their quota or their manager or whatever. They don't take ownership. They never
Yeah.
look at themselves and say, that was my fault. And a lot of sellers, they seem scared. They have a fear of having the strategic and challenging conversations with executives. They don't want to look at a CEO in the eye and tell them, "Hey, you're wrong." And it is scary to tell a CEO of a publicly traded large company that they're wrong. But you can't have that fear. You can say, "Hey, you're wrong because of this, this, and this reason," and that's credibility. That's how you build the credibility.
Yeah.
So, my I didn't know this was my reputation until recently, but I guess my reputation at Salesforce was that I didn't have any fear. My previous boss, liked to tell a story. It was during the pandemic. It was another hospitality company that we were working with, and we go and we talk to the chief business officer, and I have this presentation about our point of view and how doing a digital transformation in the middle of a pandemic is good for the hospitality company because you can pave the road while no one's driving. And we go through an hour-long presentation. At the end of the presentation, the customer had said no, of course, because they were paralyzed. My boss calls me. He goes, "Dude, that was rough." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "The customer couldn't have told you no more times, and you just kept going and just hammering this customer." And I'm like, "Oh, I never heard the word no. I didn't even realize he was telling me no. I thought we were just having a conversation." So maybe it's blissful unawareness that enables the no fear mentality.
Well, right, but you were not pushing the product. You were pushing why now was the right time, right? Very
That's right.
different. And I also heard that, the reps that point the blame at anyone but themselves. How can you improve if you're not taking that feedback?
You can't.
You can't.
Yeah, you got to take ownership. I mean, I coach a handful of sellers today, And if anyone ever comes to me and they tell me, hey, my territory sucks, I look at them, I say, I had 3 hospitality companies during a pandemic, and I was the #1 rep at Salesforce during that with that territory. I got dealt 2-7 and went all in and won.
Yeah.
That it's not an excuse. You got to figure out how to make it happen.
Right. Cool. Hey, Adam, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brian. Really enjoyed the conversation. You can find me at techstackadvising.com or on LinkedIn. Name's Adam Saad. That's spelled Saad.